student at the webinars. Okay, let's get started right away. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about design thinking. Now you might have heard this term thrown around, design thinking. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to clarify what design thinking is not. Design thinking is not designing. It's not about graphics. It's not about art. It's not about doing creative things with your hands. Design thinking is something completely different. What exactly it is, I will tell you in a while. But before we go there, I want to show you a slide. Now, if you look at this slide here, these are the skills that everyone will require to be successful in their jobs, especially as technology becomes more mainstream, as technology takes on more and more human jobs because of artificial intelligence. These are the skills that are going to benefit you in the future. But also as a developer, as a fully fledged software developer, you're going to need these skills. If you don't have these skills here, you are not going to succeed as a developer. You'll get quickly outdated. So let's go through those skills very quickly. Skill number one, mental elasticity. Mental elasticity simply means you are able to unlearn and relearn new concepts. Now, in the world of development, there's always changes taking place. So you constantly have to unlearn old concepts and learn new concepts. Languages are evolving, frameworks are evolving, technologies are evolving. So that directly has a bearing on you. Next skill is creativity. Now, creativity here doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean the arty stuff. Yes, it is partly that, but also creativity in being able to bring something new into existence. I mean, if you can bring a new app into existence or a new video game and put it out there into the app stores, then that could become a good business prospect for you. It can become a good source for you. So as a developer, you're always being creative. Not a lot of people don't understand really how creative it a developer has to be. A good developer actually is. Next skill is complex problem solving. Now, when we talk about problem solving, I think there's no career that deals with problem solving as much as software development. As a developer, you're constantly solving problems, whether it's trying to solve a problem for a client or whether it's trying to fix a bug in your code. So you need these problem solving skills. And what's great is development teaches you problem solving skills. Next one is people skills. So people skills are critically important also because as developers, as a developer, I found that there's a lot of developers that are very introverted and they don't like to communicate with others. They don't like to talk to others. They get irritable. Now, this is just not going to work. People like those, they may be good developers, but they don't make it far in their careers because they don't know how to deal with people. Now, often as developers, we have to take a lot of nonsense from customers. We have to deal with people in our team. We have to deal with project managers, and it gets stressful. But with proper people skills, we will be able to work better with everyone. And trust me, in the long run, it's better for your career. When people like you, they will recommend you, and when they recommend you, then you will get all the top positions, which also doesn't mean that you need to allow people to walk all over you. So there's a fine balance there. The next one is critical thinking. Critical thinking is the ability to look at the situation from a completely different angle and to understand it from a completely different perspective. Now, for example, when you are using an app that somebody else built, it's easy to be critical about it. When you're watching a movie, it's easy to be critical. When you listen to somebody speak or read an article, it's easy to be critical. But when it comes to your own work, it's very hard to be critical. We don't always like to be critical of our own work. But as a developer, remember you are also an innovator. And the only people that can really innovate are the ones that can look at the world around them critically so that you can find solutions to the things that you find wrong. Now, let me give you an example. As a good example of this is the app Baiju, which is based in India. So this guy used to be a school teacher, and what he found was there's a huge problem in India where kids were failing with math and science. So he looked at that problem critically, and because he saw that problem and he saw it from an angle that no one else did, I'm sure everybody knew that there was this problem, but nobody really thought about it critically. What he did was he decided to combat it and come up with some kind of solution to make kids pass maths and science. In doing that, he started a business, and now his business is valuated at 6 billion US dollars. And finally, science, technology, engineering, and maths. Okay, this doesn't apply entirely to developers, but the technology aspect applies to developers. You see, as developers, we need to keep abreast of all the changes taking place in technology around the world. Things are changing and technology is advancing. The fourth industrial revolution has kicked in. Artificial intelligence is progressing all the time. Now, as a developer, you need to know what's going on, because you will be able, if you know what's going on, you will be able to use your development skills to see opportunities that are arising in technology. For example, um, there was a young lady who came up with who came up with this idea. In fact, it was a feature that Amazon released on one of their websites, which was to allow people to lend books that they buy on Amazon to each other. So this young lady became aware of this, obviously because she was constantly in touch with what's going on in the world of technology. And what she did was she started her own website called booklending.com that actually facilitated book lending through Amazon, and she made a big business out of it. So keeping yourself abreast of all the technologies, keeping yourself uh, up to date with the technologies will always give you a very big advantage. Now, these skills are all pretty much encapsulated in this concept known as design thinking. Now, what exactly is design thinking? Design thinking is a process for creative problem solving. So basically, you solve a problem creatively, right? And it's not just a problem in your code or a problem in the user interface. It's when you think about it creatively, you're thinking about it holistically. You're looking at the entire problem. And when I give you some examples, you'll understand better what that means. Now, the key fundamental factor of design thinking is that it is human centered. Remember, when you are developing systems, when you are developing websites and apps, you are not developing for machines, you're not developing for yourself, you're developing for your end user. So, hence, you need to keep the end user in mind, and you need to develop and come up with these problems, with solutions to these problems from a human centric approach. In other words, you need to have a very good understanding of the people you are developing for and develop for them. So if you, for example, developing something for people who are tech savvy, you'll use one approach. If you are developing an app for people that are not really tech savvy, like older people, grandmoms, then you'll obviously you'll develop it completely differently. So you need to know who your audience is. Now, when you're doing design thinking, when you're coming up with a solution, you need to keep these three things in mind. One is you're developing for the people. In other words, the people that you are developing for must find your product or your solution desirable. If they don't find it desirable, it's going to flop. The next thing is the technology. The technology must be feasible. In other words, you can't dream up something that there isn't that technology available anywhere in the world right now. So you need to make sure that the technology that you are using is available and it's also within your reach. And finally, from a business perspective, it must be viable, because I mean, the business part of it is what keeps the wheels turning. And a lot of developers are shy when it comes to money matters, but really you can't afford to be, because the money matters is what makes everything else possible. If you are earning well out of your solution, and if your solution is a viable one, then you can make a business out of it. Now let me give you what that means. Is no one uh, could really make a helicopter that was cheap enough so that everybody can afford it. So that's where the whole idea flopped. So we had 2 out of 3, but the idea flopped. In a similar way, you've got technology that is feasible and you've got a viable business model, but people don't like your product. Again, it's going to flop. So you see what I'm getting at here. You have to keep all these in focus when you are designing a solution. Now, why is design thinking important? There's 4 reasons, 4 primary reasons among others. Number one, it helps understand the needs of your end user. That's the most important part of it, if you ask me. Most developers fail because they don't really understand their end users. So they go out and they develop something that works, and the user doesn't like it. And the comeback for that is, but it works. The issue with that is you need to build something not only that works, but something that fulfills the needs of your end user. You need to constantly be in touch with your end user to make sure that they find your product desirable. The next thing about design thinking, or the next reason why it's important, is that it reduces the risk of launching new ideas. Now, how does design thinking do this? I'll explain to you shortly. It next benefit is that it generates solutions that are revolutionary. Using design thinking, you're not just going to create a product, you're going to create a solution. And that solution, if it fulfills the 3 circles and it finds the sweet spot between the 3 circles, people, technology, and business, then you'll come up with something revolutionary, truly, truly revolutionary. Take Instagram, for example. Instagram, if you look at all 3, it ticks all the boxes. So Instagram is desirable. In other words, it's easy to use, it's attractive as an app. Technology-wise, it uses plain old technologies. There's nothing cutting edge about it. And business-wise, well, it's an extremely successful business model. And the 4th benefit of design thinking is that it helps organizations learn faster. Now, how does this all happen? Let me explain it to you. Firstly, we need to understand the 3 essential pillars of design thinking. Number 1, empathy. That means you can get into the shoes of your end user. So in other words, you crawl into their minds, you understand things from their perspective, you understand who they are, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what their preferences are, what they don't like, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. So you have to understand that end user properly. Ideation. Now that you understand your end user, you come up with ideas. What are the best solutions for this end user? And finally, experimentation. Now, this is what makes design thinking so powerful. The moment you understand the needs and you have some ideas, immediately you start experimenting. And you experiment with prototypes. You start building small, simple prototypes. And it doesn't even have to be an app. You could use color pencils and paper, or crayons and paper, to come up with a possible prototype. Present that to your user and say, well, if this is what the app looks like, would you use it? So you keep experimenting and you keep going back to the user. Let me explain this in more detail. But before that, where does design thinking actually apply? It applies in all of these fields here: product design, service experience and design, business design, leadership, and organizational change. So whether you're doing any of these, whether you're designing a new product, now the product could be a physical product or it could be an app or a website, whether you're designing a service and an experience. So what is a service? For example, a search engine. A search engine is a service. How would you go about designing a search engine so that your users find it appealing? If you're starting a new business, then you need to apply design thinking to cover all aspects of your business, end to end. What will be your product like? What will be your costing like? What will be the customer experience like? And design your business around that. And then as a leader, you can apply design thinking with your team. And when you are trying to change an existing organization, now some of you are going to go out and work for other companies. Now, to bring about change in those companies, you need to apply design thinking. Now let's see how design thinking actually works and why it's so powerful. So getting started with design thinking, you start by gathering insights. So for example, if you're designing an app for parents to keep track of their children, you need to understand everything about these parents, who they are, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what is the technology skill level like, and everything as much as you can about them. The next thing is to ask the right questions. Now, the only way you're going to get to know your market, to get to know your users, is by asking them questions. So you go ahead and you ask them all sorts of questions. Why do you want this app? Why do you think this app will be useful, etc.? Then you do your research. You look at similar solutions from around the world. You look at other solutions in other industries that people might have found, and you try and apply those principles. And once you have those three checked, you go ahead and you build a prototype. So you've done your research, you've gathered insights, you've asked the questions, you've done your research. Now you go and build a prototype. And remember, a prototype is not a finished product. It's a mock-up of the finished product. Now let me give you an example. In the United States, when the pharmacy chain Walgreens, they are a massive pharmacy chain, like how we have Discam here in this country. So Walgreens wanted to redesign the customer experience in their stores. From the time the person enters the store till the person leaves the store, what kind of experience will that person have? Now, well, they didn't go and start implementing ideas inside their shops, because that would be expensive and that would be risky. It would cause disruption to the business. So what they did was they took up an entire empty floor in a business, in a building, and they built a mock-up store using polystyrene sheets. So you'd walk into that mock-up prototype store. It's life size. It looks as if it's completely real, but it's not. Everything was made out of polystyrene sheets. And so what they did was they brought certain customers, they brought certain end users, they brought their management guys, they brought people off the street to walk through that and give feedback. And as people gave feedback, then they shifted things around. So that was a brilliant way to find a solution. And when they found that solution, the ideal layout for a business, for a shop, then they only then did they implement that into the actual stores. And then the last step is to repeat. So you build your first prototype. Now what you do is you go back to step one, gather insights. That means you start talking to people. You start asking questions. You do more research. You tweak your prototype. You come back. You repeat. Again, go through the process until that product is complete. Now, these prototypes need to be what we call in the development world quick and dirty, meaning they're not perfect, they're not beautiful, they are functional, they give the user enough information about what the end product is going to be. Now, let me give you a beautiful example of design thinking. Now, when you look at this image, what are you seeing? Really, what is this? Now, people look at this and some say it's some kind of joy ride, some kind of ride for kids. Some say it's a playroom, but in reality, this is what is called an MRI scanner. That scanner that you can that they use in medical facilities to scan a person's whole body to diagnose any illnesses. Now, there's a very interesting story behind why this MRI scanner looks like this. Now, the guy that designed this MRI scanner, Doug Dietz, a guy by the name of Doug Dietz, he worked for a company called General Electric. And they developed these MRI scanners, and these were cutting edge technology. These were absolutely cutting edge, beautiful technology. And not only that, but they came in at a very low price. So it ticked two of the boxes. The technology was feasible, and from a business perspective, it was viable. And when they put this out into the market, lots and lots of hospitals started buying it. So he decided to go and visit one of those hospitals and see how it's being used. And when he got there, when one of the patients was coming in, he got the shock of his life. It was a little girl. She was absolutely thin and frail because she was quite sickly. And as she came into this room where this MRI was, she started to cry. And she held her father's hand tightly. She says to him, I don't want to go inside this thing. I'm scared. So in any case, the nurse had to call an anesthetist to knock her out. And they gave her anesthesia. They knocked her out, and only then could they put her through the machine. So when he saw this, he asked the nurse, why did you call an anesthetist? Because for MRI, you don't need to knock the person out. The person can be awake. Then the nurse said, we can't avoid it because these children are so scared that we just have to knock them out because they go into a panic state when they get into that machine, because that it's like putting yourself through this tube and there's all these noises around you. It's a terrifying prospect. So nonetheless, what Doug did was he went back and he applied design thinking. He saw that he only checked two of the boxes, two of the circles, the technology and the business, but he didn't check the people circle. So what he did was he decided to redesign these machines so that they look like theme parks. They look like things that children will be attracted to. So this particular one looks like a pirate ship, and they made others that look like other themes like fairy tale houses and things. And then not only that, but they also designed a narrative, a story around this pirate ship. So when the nurse brings a kid into the room, then she starts with the story. She says, now we're going to go onto this pirate ship and we're going to ride the high seas and you're going to hear all these noises. That's the pirate ship, that's the anchor working, and that's the sound of the water, etc. So the child, in her imagination, she's entering a pirate ship. She's entering a fantasy world, not a scary machine. And in doing this, what Doug Deeds actually achieved, the children were actually now enjoying the whole experience rather than being terrified of it. And he says the turning point for me came when one child asked her father, after the MRI scan, she asked her father, can we please come back tomorrow? So that was really awesome how they used design thinking to change the entire user experience. Same machine, same technology, same everything, except that they vastly improved the user experience. Now, this is what design thinking is all about. And to be really good at design thinking, you need to do four things. You need to race, RACE. Read, that means to keep yourself up to date with what's going on in the world of technology. Second, you need to anticipate problems and anticipate opportunities. I mean, you must be able to see, hey, I just saw this new technology come out. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to develop something around this technology and start a business around it. The next thing is, after you come up with your idea, you create a solution. And finally, after you create a solution, you jump to action, you execute. Now, this last one is the most important because most of the technical guys that I know, most of those that are geniuses at coding and other technologies, they have the best ideas, but they're weak on execution. They don't, they're too lazy in most cases to actually go and make something. But this is where design thinking comes in. You execute by making a simple, quick and dirty solution, and you test it out with your end users. And based on the feedback, you come back and you redesign it, and then you put it out. And then it's a cyclic process. You put it out, you get feedback, you tweak, you put it out again, you get feedback, you tweak. But the main point is do something, get going. Don't sit and think too much. Don't overthink it. Just get going. So that's design thinking in a nutshell. And if you are really good at design thinking and you combine that with your development skills, then you'll be setting yourself up for a highly, highly successful career in development, either whether you're working for a company or you're starting your own business. So you'll be not just a developer, but you'll be a problem solver, you'll be an innovator, you'll be a person that now will be looked up to in the industry. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm not going to stick around for questions. I'm not going to stick around for questions because I have to attend another meeting. But please feel free to ask your questions on the YouTube comments, but also on the forums and on the learning management system. I'll be happy to answer your questions there. Okay, awesome, guys. Thanks for coming by, and I hope this was a valuable session for you guys. Thanks a lot.